Welcome to Clara Head and welcome to autumn in Ireland, where you're boiling 1 minute and freezing the next, and where the car that was clean 10 minutes ago is now filthy. But also welcome to the Skoda Enyaq 80x. Now we know about the Enyaq. In fact, we know all about the Enyaq. I owned one for a year, and the AA jury just voted this as the family EV of the year. So that means it beat off stiff competition from the likes of the Kia EV6, Hyundai Ioniq 5, and of course lots of Teslas. So why is the Enyaq so good? And also, why should you care about the 80x? This is a new version with 2 electric motors instead of 1, more power, less range, but a better towing capacity and better grip. So should you pay the extra for the 80x, or should you just stick to the regular Enyaq? Let's find out. So for those of you who have an Enyaq, you're in a pretty exclusive club, because suffice to say, supply has been pretty miserable since it came out just about 18 months ago, compared to the ID4, which has been pretty plentiful in terms of supply, and they've been selling thousands of them, where these have been sold in hundreds. But for anyone who does get an Enyaq, they're getting a really complete package. First of all, it looks really good. It's taken all of the various nice elements from the Karoq, from the Kodiaq, and packaged it in that MEB platform into something that is not massive, but has lots of road presence, but has tons of interior space, because of course when you use an MEB platform you can tear up the rule book, and the interior is much bigger than it does appear on the outside. At the back you've got a big generous 585 litre boot space, but there's plenty of space up front and in the back for a family. Now there's no 7-seater option yet. Maybe that will come later on. We're seeing certainly concept cars, Vision S, that will give an indication of what a 7-seater Skoda EV will look like. But for now, the Enyaq range starts with the 60, which is a 58 kilowatt hour battery. There's the 80, which is the one pretty much everyone buys, which is a 77 kilowatt hour battery. And then there's this, which is the 80X. And the X stands for all-wheel drive. So instead of a single motor powering the rear wheels, you have 2 motors, one powering the front axle and a second powering the rear axle, and that means more power. In the case of the 80X, that's 265 horsepower versus the around 200 horsepower for the standard version. It adds more torque as well. There's plenty more torque in this, 425 Newton meters. That will make the car faster. It does shave about 2 seconds off the 0 to 100 kilometer per hour time, but it does affect the range as well. You are going to sap some of the range because, of course, you're adding more weight. You're adding just about 200 kilograms more in the 80X than the already fairly weighty standard 80. So there are pluses and minuses to this car, but overall the Enyaq is just such a good buy. At the back, in terms of practicality, there is a 585 litre boot space. This one has a powered tailgate. They don't all have that. It does come as part of a pack, but what you do have, of course, is just this generous boot space. 585 litres is big. There are plenty of separate cubby holes and hangers and power points in the back, so it is very, very practical. But for most families' needs, this is going to be totally adequate.
When it comes to the interior of the Enyaq, this is where Skoda have really put time, effort and lots of thought into making the cabin just an excellent place to be. The quality, fit and finish, the materials is first class. And of course, as we all see these days, the centre console dominated by what is a large infotainment screen. This is a 13-inch unit and lots of functions live behind this. Climate control lives behind this, and there are various menus, but most people will tend to stick to the likes of Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which connect wirelessly in this car as well. There are as well plenty of menus that will demonstrate how the vehicle is doing as well, in terms of charging and in terms of charging performance as well. So you can see that this car is 50% charge. You can check on various functions within the car and their status, be it service status, tire pressure, but as well as that you can check in the menus on your driving performance. At the moment this is returning 22.8 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, but we are in colder climate and we haven't really been trying too hard to get the best performance. There are some physical buttons down here as well, for things like the demister and the various driving modes. You can have eco, normal and sport mode, and then you can tailor those within that to make a more specific driver profile. But overall, it's just a nice finish. I like this 2-spoke steering wheel. There are physical buttons here for the volumes, which you don't get in the likes of Volkswagen, but there are still haptic buttons for the volume controls here. So there's a mix of both technologies, but this certainly feels nicer and a little bit more high quality than you'll get in Volkswagen ID4, for example.
So naturally, with any EV, people are going to ask about range, and when you get the 80x, you add four-wheel drive, add a bit more weight, you're going to suffer in terms of range. You're going to use a little bit less. You're going to return a little bit less, should I say. 521 is the official WLTP figure for this car. It's not really going to happen. You're going to be talking in and around 400 or so from a full charge, depending on weather, depending on how you drive it, that sort of thing. It does use more energy than the standard 80. The 80's official figure is 544. I know from owning one that it was around 380, 400 from a full charge. So that's what you can expect. But look, like anything else with an EV, it's going to depend on how you drive it. You do drive on a motorway in a heavy vehicle at 120 kilometers per hour pushing through the wind. You're going to use a lot more energy than if you drive at 100 kilometers per hour in the inside lane. That has a dramatic effect. So look, depending on how you drive it, that will dictate the fuel economy.
So as I've mentioned already, I have previous with the Enyaq because I owned one. I owned one for 12 months. I had an 80. It was rear-wheel drive, so the single motor version, and it had a few bits and bobs and toys on it. You can actually watch a video of me discussing it with Nobby on Cars, Mark Noble. I'll put a link in the video in the description below to see that video. But that was when I just got the car. I drove it for 30,000 kilometers and then let it go recently because you know what, there was equity in it and I wanted to use the money for something else. But I do miss it. It's really nice to be back into the Enyaq. It feels very familiar, and of course I'm very familiar with this car because I spent so much time and did so many kilometers in it. Which leads us on to the 80x. Is there a point to it? Does it feel that much faster? Well, there's a point to it, of course, on two fronts. If you need to tow, then it's going to make a lot more sense because it has a better towing capacity, and of course that extra grip provided by the extra motor is going to be useful to you. Sure, it's more powerful, it shaves about 2 seconds off on the 0 to 100 km per hour sprint, but it still doesn't feel like a very fast EV. When you compare it to the likes of the Tesla Model Y or the Ford Mach-E, which have that neck snapping acceleration, this car just doesn't have that because pretty much the extra weight puts paid to that. The Enyaq is already quite a heavy car, but when you add another 200 kilograms to it, it's not going to be very, very fast. It's like putting two of me in the rear seats. It adds quite a bit of extra weight. So paying the extra money for the X, which sure gives you the towing capacity, sure gives you the four-wheel drive, but also robs some of the range compared to the standard version, well, it's going to be a considered choice. You're going to choose it because you need it, not because it's going to do anything massively different dynamically. Sure, it feels maybe a little bit more sure-footed when you really push it on, but for most people, the standard 80 is going to be fine. And if it was me buying again, I'd just get the same car again.